There is a moment in the life of almost everyone who builds wealth when something strange happens. You have been investing for years, watching your account balance grow so slowly that it barely seems worth the sacrifice. You have been putting money in month after month, checking your statements, doing the math, and feeling like nothing is really changing. The numbers move, but they do not move enough. The progress is real but invisible, like watching grass grow, like waiting for water to boil. And then one day, without warning, everything shifts. You check your account and the growth from last month is larger than your entire contribution. You realize that your money made more money while you slept than you used to make in a week of working. You look at the trajectory and suddenly understand that the curve is no longer flat. It is bending upward, accelerating, becoming something that feels almost impossible given where you started. And in that moment, you understand what no amount of reading or calculating could have prepared you for. There are invisible thresholds in wealth building, numbers that do not just represent more money, but represent a fundamental change in how money works for you, and almost nobody talks about them. This video is about those thresholds, not the theoretical concept of compound interest that you've heard explained 100 times, not vague promises about how investing will make you rich someday. I want to show you the specific numbers where everything changes, the milestones where money stops being something you push uphill and starts becoming something that pulls you forward. Because understanding these thresholds will not just help you build wealth, it will keep you from quitting during the long, discouraging period when most people give up. And that period, the years when nothing seems to be happening, is exactly where fortunes are made and lost. Not by dramatic decisions, by the simple choice to keep going when keeping going feels pointless. But before we get to the numbers, I need to destroy a myth that keeps people from ever starting, or keeps them from continuing once they have started. The myth is that wealth building is mysterious, that it requires secrets known only to the rich, that some people have figured out tricks and loopholes and strategies that explain why they got ahead while you stayed stuck. And this myth is comforting in a way, because if wealth requires special knowledge you do not have, then your current situation is not your fault. You're not behind because of your choices. You're behind because the game is rigged and the rules are hidden. But this is not true. Wealth building is not magic. It is math. It is the most boring, predictable, mechanical math imaginable. If you put money into assets that grow over time and you keep doing it, and you do not take the money out, you will become wealthy. Not might. Will. The math guarantees it. The only variables are how much you invest, what return you earn, and how long you let it compound. That is it. There is no secret. There is no trick. There is only the relentless, impersonal force of mathematics working in your favor if you let it, and working against you if you do not. And yet almost nobody lets it work. Almost nobody stays invested long enough to reach the thresholds where everything changes. And the reason is psychological, not mathematical. The reason is that the early years of wealth building are brutal. They are discouraging in a way that makes people feel like they are doing something wrong, when in fact they are doing everything right. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine you start investing $500 a month. This is not a small amount for most people. This requires sacrifice. It requires saying no to things you want, living below your means, making choices that feel painful in the moment. And you do this for a year. 12 months of discipline. 12 months of watching money leave your account and go somewhere you cannot touch it. At the end of that year, assuming a reasonable market return, you have maybe $6,200. Your contributions were $6,000. The market gave you $200. You sacrificed for 12 months and the reward was $200. This does not feel like wealth building. This feels like a waste of time. And here is where most people quit. Not because the math is wrong. The math is exactly right. But because the psychology is unbearable, you're doing all the work. Your effort completely dominates the outcome. The market's contribution is so small compared to your sacrifice that it seems almost insulting. You could have spent that $6,000 on things that would have made your life better right now, and instead you have $6,000 plus a rounding error sitting in an account you cannot use, theoretically growing at a rate that will not matter for decades. This is the cruel joke of compound interest. It is most powerful when it is least visible, and least powerful when you most need encouragement. In the early years, your contributions are everything, and growth is nothing. The blue bar on the chart, the money you put in, towers over the green bar, the money the market generated, and no matter how many times someone explains compounding to you, no matter how many charts you see showing exponential curves, the lived experience of those early years is flatness, grind, sacrifice without obvious reward. It feels like you're pushing a boulder uphill and the hill never ends. But here is what you need to understand, what you need to burn into your mind so deeply that you cannot forget it even when discouragement is screaming at you to quit. This phase ends. The flatness is not forever. There is a point, a specific point, where the math shifts in your favor so dramatically that everything feels different. And that point arrives at the first major milestone, $10,000. $10,000 does not sound like much. In a world of millionaires and billionaires, $10,000 seems almost embarrassingly small to celebrate. But $10,000 is not primarily a financial milestone. It is a psychological one. It is proof. Proof that you can do this. Proof that the system works. Proof that you are someone who invests, someone who builds, someone who plays the long game. And this proof, this identity shift, matters more than the money itself. Think about what it took to get there. If you invested $500 a month, $10,000 represents 20 months of discipline. 20 months of choosing the future over the present. 20 months of building a habit that most people never build. The money itself is almost secondary to what the money represents. You have become a different kind of person. You have proven that you can delay gratification, that you can maintain consistency, that you can do something hard without immediate reward. And this identity, once formed, is self-reinforcing. You are no longer someone who is trying to become an investor. You are an investor. The behavior is no longer aspirational. It is definitional. But $10,000 is also the most dangerous milestone, because it is the one where quitting feels most rational. The growth is still pathetically small compared to your contributions. The market might give you a few $100s in a good year, which seems laughable compared to the effort required, and you have $10,000 sitting there, accessible, tempting you with all the things it could buy right now. A vacation, a car repair, an upgrade to your life that feels tangible in a way that future wealth does not. This is where I need to tell you something that might save your financial life. Do not sell. Under almost any circumstance, do not sell. Even if you cannot contribute another dollar, even if your financial life falls apart and you cannot add to this account for years, do not sell. Because here is what happens if you just leave it alone. $10,000, earning a reasonable average return, becomes $20,000 in about 10 years without you doing anything at all. It becomes $40,000 in 20 years. It becomes $80,000 in 30 years. That $10,000 you attempted to spend on something forgettable could be the foundation of real wealth, not because you added to it, but because you did not subtract from it. Time alone creates growth. Your only job is to not interrupt it. And here is something that most people completely overlook, something that can dramatically accelerate your journey through these milestones without requiring you to earn a single dollar more. Structural advantages built into the system itself. I'm talking about retirement accounts, tax advantages, and employer matching. These are not complicated financial instruments reserved for the sophisticated. They are tools available to almost anyone with a job, and ignoring them is like leaving free money on the table while complaining that you cannot afford to invest. Let me be specific. If your employer offers a 401k match, which many do, they are literally giving you free money for investing. A common structure is that the employer matches 50% of your contributions up to 6% of your salary. This means if you earn $50,000 a year and contribute 6%, which is $3,000, your employer adds another $1,500. You have instantly earned a 50% return before the market does anything at all. There is no investment strategy, no stock pick, no brilliant timing that can reliably give you a 50% guaranteed return. But the employer match does it automatically, and yet millions of people do not take full advantage of it because they do not understand what they are leaving behind. And the tax advantages compound this further. Money you contribute to a traditional 401k or IRA reduces your taxable income in the year you contribute. If you are in the 22% tax bracket and you contribute $5,000, you save $1,100 in taxes that year. That is not a return on investment. That is a discount on the investment itself. You are paying less to put the same amount to work, and the money grows tax deferred, meaning you do not pay taxes on the gains each year, allowing compounding to work on a larger base. The math becomes almost absurd when you combine these advantages. Suppose you contribute $500 a month to a 401k. With a 50% employer match on the first 6%, your actual invested amount might be $650 or $700 monthly, depending on your salary. That is an extra $1,800 to $2,400 per year that you did not earn, did not sacrifice for, and did not even notice leaving your paycheck. Over a decade, that match alone could be worth $20,000 to $30,000 before accounting for any growth. Over a career, it could be worth hundreds of thousands. And all you had to do was check a box and set a percentage. This is what I mean when I say wealth can be accelerated without earning more. The structural advantages are sitting there, built into the system, waiting for anyone who bothers to understand and use them. The person who maximizes their employer match and uses tax-advantaged accounts will reach each milestone years faster than the person who invests the same amount in a taxable brokerage account. Not because they are smarter or luckier, but because they understood that the system has levers and they pulled them. And if you can keep contributing, if you can push through the discouraging phase and keep adding to the pile while using every structural advantage available to you, something remarkable happens. The second milestone arrives faster than you expect, and everything changes when it does. That milestone is $100,000. $100,000 is where compounding stops being theoretical and starts being visceral. At $100,000, assuming a reasonable market return, you might earn $8,000 to $10,000 in a single year from growth alone. That is not a rounding error. That is a real number. That is more than many people save in a year. That is your money working a part-time job on your behalf while you sleep. And for the first time, you can feel the shift. You are no longer doing all the work, the money is starting to carry some of the weight. But the psychological shift is even more profound than the mathematical one. At $100,000, you start seeing yourself differently. You start making decisions differently. You have breathing room. Not enough to quit your job, not enough to stop working, but enough to feel less desperate. Enough to negotiate from strength instead of weakness. Enough to take a risk you would not have taken before because you know that failure will not destroy you. $100,000 is not freedom, but it is the first glimpse of what freedom might feel like. And here is something that will recalibrate your entire timeline. Each additional 100,000 comes faster than the last. The first 100,000 might take 10 or 15 years of grinding. The second 100,000 might take 5. The third might take 3. Because the larger your base, the more the growth contributes relative to your contributions. You're no longer pushing the boulder. The boulder is starting to roll on its own, and your job is shifting from pushing to steering. This is where a concept called coast-fire becomes relevant, and even if you have no interest in retiring early, understanding this concept will change how you think about time and money. Coast-fire is the point where you have invested enough that, even if you never contribute another dollar, compounding alone will grow your portfolio to a comfortable retirement by traditional retirement age. For many people, $100,000 invested in their 30s puts them at or near this threshold, which means that every contribution after this point is not catching up. It is accelerating. It is buying earlier freedom, not basic security. Think about what this means. If you reach $100,000 by 35, you could theoretically stop investing entirely, let the money sit for 30 years, and still retire with a substantial portfolio. You probably will not stop because by this point the habit is ingrained and the progress is finally exciting. But you could. The pressure is off. The foundation is laid. Everything from here is building a house on solid ground instead of scrambling to pour the foundation while the rain is already falling. But I want to pause here and address something that might be running through your mind, something that stops more people from building wealth than any market crash or economic downturn. The belief that it is too late. You might be reading this thinking that these milestones are for young people who started early, not for someone your age who is already behind. And I need to tell you directly that this belief, however emotionally compelling, is mathematically wrong. Yes, starting earlier is better. The math is unambiguous on this point. $1 invested at 25 is worth far more than $1 invested at 45 because it has more time to compound. But here is what people forget. Compounding still works at 45, it still works at 55, it still works at any age where you have more than a few years ahead of you. The person who starts at 45 and invests consistently for 20 years will still build substantial wealth. Not as much as if they had started earlier, but vastly more than if they never start at all. The choice is not between optimal and worthless. The choice is between something and nothing. And something, even imperfect something, even late something, is infinitely better than nothing. And when you actually run the numbers, the required contributions are less intimidating than you might think. $500 a month sounds like a lot. But if your employer offers a retirement match, which many do, you might only need to contribute $300 to see $500 actually invested. That is $75 a week. That is the cost of a few meals out, a subscription or two, the accumulated friction of small daily expenses that add up to nothing memorable. You do not need to transform your entire life to find this money. You need to redirect money that is currently disappearing into forgettable purchases towards something that will compound for decades. And now we arrive at the third milestone, the one that changes everything, the one where the rules of money invert completely: $1 million. $1 million is not a lifestyle number, it is a freedom number. At $1 million invested in diversified assets returning a reasonable average, you can expect somewhere around $70,000 to $100,000 in annual growth during a typical year. This number will vary wildly from year to year. Some years will be negative, some years will far exceed this. But over time, averaged out, your portfolio is generating more than most people earn from working. And this means something that will feel strange the first time you truly understand it. You no longer need to work for money. You might choose to work, you probably will, because work provides meaning and structure and identity beyond its financial function. But you no longer need to. The money works whether you do or not. Your portfolio has become a machine that generates income independent of your labor, and that machine will keep running as long as you do not break it. This is where the 4% rule becomes relevant. The 4% rule is a guideline suggesting that if you withdraw 4% of your portfolio each year, adjusted for inflation, your money has a high probability of lasting 30 years or more. On a $1 million portfolio, 4% is $40,000. That might not sound like luxury, but it is security. It is enough to cover basic expenses without working. It is enough to take risks, to pursue projects that do not pay immediately, to say no to situations that compromise your values. And if your portfolio grows to 2 million, the number doubles. At 5 million, you can withdraw $200,000 a year indefinitely. The math scales, the freedom scales. Everything changes once you cross the threshold where your money generates more money than you need to spend. But I want to be clear about something, because the financial independence community sometimes loses sight of this. The goal is not the number. The goal is what the number enables. Money is a tool. It buys options, time, and the ability to design a life that fits your actual values rather than the values imposed by financial necessity. The person who sacrifices all joy and connection to reach $1 million faster is not one. They've traded their life for a number. The person who builds wealth slowly while also living, while also enjoying the journey, while also maintaining relationships and health and meaning, understands something that pure optimizers miss. The point of financial freedom is to live well, and living well cannot be postponed indefinitely without losing the ability to do it at all. So yes, pursue the milestones, understand the math, let compounding work its quiet magic over decades. But do not forget why you are doing it. Do not become so focused on the destination that you miss the life happening along the way. The person who reaches $1 million but has no relationships, no health, and no capacity for joy has built a prison with a nice view. The person who reaches it while also loving, laughing, experiencing and growing has built something worth having. Money should serve your life, not replace it. The milestones are meaningful because of what they enable, not because of what they represent on a spreadsheet. And this brings us to the most important variable in all of wealth building, the one that no amount of optimization can substitute for, the one that separates those who reach these milestones from those who never do: time. Time is the multiplier that makes everything work. A mediocre return over a long period beats an excellent return over a short period. A modest contribution maintained for decades beats a large contribution maintained for years. You cannot hack time. You cannot optimize around it. You can only use it or waste it, and every month you delay starting is a month of compounding you will never get back. This is not meant to induce panic. Starting late is better than never starting. But it is meant to induce urgency. If you have been telling yourself that you will start investing when you earn more, when your expenses are lower, when the market is less volatile, when you understand more, You're paying a price for that delay that you cannot see. Every month of inaction has a cost that only becomes visible decades later, when the money that could have been compounding was instead sitting idle, waiting for conditions that would never be perfect. So let me bring this together. There are 3 milestones that change how money works. The first is $10,000. This is proof of concept. Proof that you can do it, that the habit is real, that you are someone who builds wealth. The money itself is almost irrelevant. The identity shift is everything. The second is $100,000. This is where compounding becomes real, where growth starts doing meaningful work, where the psychological pressure eases and the future starts to feel possible rather than theoretical. The third is $1 million. This is where money generates freedom, where work becomes optional, where the rules invert and money works for you instead of you working for money. And here is the truth that ties all 3 together. Most people will never reach even the first milestone, not because they cannot afford to invest, not because the math is against them, but because they will quit during the discouraging phase when nothing seems to be happening. They will sell when the market drops and lock in losses that could have been temporary. They will let perfect be the enemy of good and never start because they cannot start optimally. They will reach 10,000 and spend it, or reach 50,000 and decide that's enough, or get impatient at 90,000 and chase a risky bet that wipes out years of progress. You do not have to be most people. The math is on your side if you let it work. The milestones are reachable if you keep going. The thresholds where everything changes are not reserved for the lucky or the brilliant. They're available to anyone willing to be patient, willing to be consistent, willing to trust a process that feels pointless until suddenly it does not. 12 months from now, you will be somewhere. 5 years from now, you will be somewhere. 30 years from now, when most of your working life is behind you, you will either have crossed these thresholds or you will not. And the difference will not be talent or luck or circumstance. The difference will be whether you understood that wealth building is not a sprint where speed matters, but an endurance race where survival matters. The people who win are not the ones who started with the most or earned the highest returns. The people who win are the ones who kept going when others quit, who stayed invested when others sold, who trusted the math when the math seemed to be lying,